Well, thank you, Heather. Thanks everybody for joining us today for this conversation. As far as the panel goes, for those of you that know me, I'm pretty laid back, and this is going to kind of be a roundtable. And I made sure I had some people that were willing to talk, and that's Christy, Kathleen, Jake, and Bob. Bob, your name just went totally out of my brain. But anyone else who participated at any point in time with the 21-day challenge, please, if you want to jump in and join the conversation, please do so. Like I said, it's just meant to be an opportunity to talk about why we did this and what we may have learned. First of all, I have the big disclaimer that I want to do, kind of like whenever a lawyer speaks, but they aren't your direct representative. I am not an expert in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Personally, I view all of this as a journey and that everyone is at our own point in the journey. So from that standpoint, if you're looking for me to have all the answers, I'm not going to provide them, but maybe as a group, we can, start chipping away at a few things. Just to kind of cover the basics so everybody knows what we're talking about. The Livingston County United Way sponsored a 21-day equity challenge. I got the two screens going here and like all of my words are over here, so that's why I'm doing the funny head thing. They did sponsor a 21-day equity challenge, which ran January 19th through February 8th. Participants received a daily email with links to articles, videos, podcasts. They focused on 7 areas of content, one being definitions and general content, which really focused around race and racial identity. We read about and learned about internalized racism, interpersonal racism, institutional racism, structural racism, and then sort of next steps and additional resources. The only thing that I would say about it is when I signed up and they said it would be like 15 minutes a day. Yeah, right. You could spend hours a day reading everything that they sent you. So if you participated but didn't read it all, don't worry. Hopefully you saved all those emails like I did and you can go back and find some of the stuff that you were interested in but just didn't have time for, or maybe some of the things that you would be interested in reading again. The Livingston County United Way held a community conversation every Friday, and I was able to participate in several of those. And then I had put together or invited people that were interested within the Rotary Club on Thursday afternoons during that point in time. I know a lot of people participated, but I get it. Life is busy. So once again, if you didn't make a call, but you want to answer some of the questions I'm going to throw out, please feel free to comment. So I came up with some questions because my fellow roundtable participants kept going, are there specific questions we should prepare for? Okay, fine. So my first question, and like I said, I'm just going to throw this out and hopefully we won't all talk over one another, is what prompted you to participate in the challenge?
I'd be happy to share what prompted me. Primarily with curiosity. I'm always kind of that silver lining guy, trying to see the good in everything. And this was an interesting thing to me. I'm a big proponent for getting everyone involved and treating people equally. And I was always brought up to treat others the way I wanted to be treated. So the thought of having equity in everyone or finding equity in everyone just appealed to me. And it's been a really interesting experience.
Thanks, Jake. Kathy had her hand up, and then I'm going to go to Bob.
I don't know how to take the hand down, I guess. Lower hand. Okay, there we are. I figured it out. Yay. My book group started reading a few years ago. I think it was at least 2 to 2.5 years ago, about people who are different than us. And so we've actually had quite a journey. This ties right into that. We also did a 10-session thing that's sponsored by the one of the churches that one of our members is part of. But it was basically about equity and racism, and it was very intense. And from that, it is a journey. I agree with Holly that I feel that it's a deep sort of learning that takes me outside of my own experiences into other people's that are nothing like mine. And it's that something beyond my own life that I can take part in and hopefully develop more empathy. So that was really why, and I want to continue.
All right, I think it's up to me now. Yeah, I was curious about what equity involved, and like Jake said, he always thought about treating people equally. And then I learned there's a big difference between equality and equity. And they had a graphic where they had 3 people looking over a fence at a baseball game. And the definition of equality was they were all standing on a box that was the same size. So the shortest person didn't reach the top of the fence, couldn't see anything. And the tallest person was way above it. And then equity is basically individualizing the needs of the people. And so the shorter person had a big box, the tall person didn't have a box, and the middle person had a medium-sized box, so they all had the same view. And that graphic kind of stuck with me. And the other concept that fits into this is this idea of color blindness, where you treat everybody the same regardless of color. It's like you don't see color. And you know, I think I had always tried to do that. And then now I realize that that isn't really a good idea, that by not seeing color, you're not respecting the people and who they are, and trying to homogenize everything. And so I think the whole idea of equity and recognizing the differences in people and giving people differing levels of support is a concept that I didn't quite get before I took the course. And then I could give an example, a recent example of this equity concept is the way that Michigan is distributing the COVID vaccines across the state. The number of doses that each county gets, it depends on how many disadvantaged people they have, because the minority, the poor populations have a much higher death rate than everybody else. And so, you know, Detroit and Flint and other places that have a large minority population get a lot more vaccines. And Livingston County, because we have the fewest minority population and the highest household income, we get relatively few vaccines. So we're all scrambling to get the vaccines, and half the people are having to leave the county to get the vaccines. And I know that the county board passed a resolution saying that they don't think this is fair because they want equality and everybody gets the same. But you know, I've come to believe that the equity is a better approach, even though it's inconvenient for me, you know, and my family. So, I'll turn it back to Heather. No, it was Holly. It was Holly. Yeah.
And I'm going to hand it off to Christy, so go for it.
I was just going to say, I think the 3 of you articulated beautifully all great reasons, and I can relate to all of those as well. I think the only additional thing I would add of why I joined was I was excited to see programming specific to this that was well curated, where I didn't feel like I was getting information from the news or going out on my own. I felt like I could trust the source and the vetting process of how it was shared and who it was shared by. And in my line of, I mean, as a human being, I want to know this stuff, but also in my line of work, we get asked a lot at ECTO about implicit bias training or diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how can we help employers learn this? And I feel like it's something we're all very well aware of, but it's not something I feel qualified to train on yet. And we always, we kind of joke about like, how qualified are a bunch of white people to talk about this to other people, right? Like, we could be qualified, but I really want to be sensitive to that and honor differences. And I know I appreciate it when my differences are honored. You know, this may sound silly, but like I think of whenever I was pregnant, people were so nice to me, right? Like people are usually really nice to a pregnant person. You know, they honored the fact that, hey, you're carrying another human, you're different right now, right? So differences can take lots of shapes and sizes. And I think this really helped broaden my perspective on all the types of differences that are out there and how they can be recognized and appreciated.
Did anybody else want to jump in that participated about why? Going once?
Sure, Babette, I just want to say thank you for doing this. It really came for us at a critical point at La Casa because we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee that we've developed within our organization that includes volunteer staff and our board of directors. Because again, our services touch a variety of people, and we also touch many people from other communities that come into our shelter, from Detroit, from Flint, from Lansing, and so on. So really taking time to focus on this. And I know I had several staff participate as well. So thank you, because I think it's critical that we do this and that we have these conversations and within our own organization, as well as then how we can impact the community. And also on a personal note, I was very interested in it because I am an adoptive mother of children of color. My children are Asian. And so I was interested in seeing from that perspective too, because I'll tell you, my life definitely changed when I adopted children that don't look like me and have them assimilate into my home and into my family, and being able to address issues and things that they're confronted with, such as with the COVID. You know, you're Chinese, you brought it here. You know, they actually heard things and were confronted with things that I, as a Caucasian, do not have to deal with. And so I was interested in that perspective too. On a personal note, if there were other things I could gain to support and help my children also deal with the world in which they live, which has been very difficult lately with COVID and everything else that's happening in our country. So thank you for doing that series. And I think it's a wonderful addition to our community. So thank you.
Okay, I'm going to jump to my question number 2, which was, did you have an aha moment during this process? And if so, are you willing to share what it was?
I'll share again. Be the one to start us off here. Yes, I did, in fact. And I think mine came, actually, I want to talk about 2 things. So I think the aha moment actually happened when we were talking about microaggressions. Throughout this process, I learned a lot more of what my white privilege looks like. I suppose I was always to some degree aware of it, but I didn't realize the impact of some statements that I would make on those who don't necessarily have the same privileges I do. I've always talked about working hard to get to my station in life, not really considering the head start that I had. I realize now that some statements I make to that degree, in speaking with somebody who has not had the same head start, has not had the same privileges given or granted to them, may see that as either condescending or not taking everything into consideration. So a lot of my speech, a lot of the things that I have said before, I'm sure could have been construed as not very thoughtful of others. And I guess it's just kind of made me realize that I need to change, you know, some of the things, basically take all things into consideration when I'm having a conversation like that.
Thanks, Jake. It's like I said, it's a journey. Hey, Bob, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, the part that really impressed me that I didn't realize before, I had heard about the discrepancies within the criminal justice system about how African-American populations are grossly overrepresented in the prison population, and how many in getting arrested for more frequently for like drug use, like marijuana possession, than white people, even though they have about the same rate of use. But the thing that really impressed me was how this extends back to childhood, and how disciplinary things like school suspensions and expulsions and involvement with the juvenile justice system are disproportionately higher in the Black population. And you know, how, you know, affluent kids that have behavior problems, they're dealt with like, they get an IEP, and they, you know, they get a behavior management plan and all these kind of things, where the disadvantaged people are just suspended, or you know, referred to the juvenile court, you know. So and there's they talked about kind of a pipeline from the schools into the justice system that starts at an early age. And, you know, as a child psychiatrist, you know, that really made an impact on me.
Yeah, the school to prison pipeline. I think that was my saddest moment during all of this. Did anybody else have an aha moment that they wanted to share? Okay. My third question was, did you read or view something that really stuck with you? Which is sort of the one side of did this challenge help increase your understanding of a particular concept or situation? Bob, do you still have your hand up from before, or did you raise your hand again? I'm going with before because it just disappeared.
I'm trying to turn it off.
Yeah. So was there something that really stuck with you, or something that really helped you to understand a concept?
One of the videos that really stuck with me, and this may sound silly, but it really, I mean, I still think about it, is how, I think it was about the institutional racism and just how systems are set up to favor certain people. And there was a presenter giving, I think, a TED talk about how students they found out that students of color were proportionately not going to office hours in college and utilizing office hours and taking advantage of that time with professors. And they correlated that to underperformance. And when they did some more digging, they realized that the students didn't understand what office hours were, and that it was meant to be their time, because in the schools they came from, high schools, it was not necessarily similar to where some of the other students had come from, and they thought office hours meant that is the professor's own time to get their work done, right? Like, I'm in the office, I think about now at home, I have a kid quarantined, like, I'm in the office working, you leave me alone, right? These are my office hours. But no, in college, for most of us who have had the privilege of going to a four-year university, no, the office hours is when you go to get help and that one-on-one attention. And that, it may seem so minor, but it's like, wow, it really is ingrained in the system. And I think a further understanding, there's still so much more to learn. If I had to, I feel like I'm this far into understanding particularly the institutional and systemic pieces of this. There's still so much to learn.
Kathy.
This book was not part of specifically this one, but it was part of our readings for my other series, and it's called Waking Up White. It's written by, and Finding Myself in the Story of Race. And but a lot of the things from this book were in the different things, and this was just one piece, but there's so much in this book because it's a white woman speaking to white people, and so it really spoke to me a lot. And in the real kind of ways of what Jake said, the impact, the intention versus impact, and how our intentions may be really good, but we don't have a connection to where they're coming from, and the impact can be very negative, and we don't even know it. So it's really learning about the different ways that people perceive. And Christy said this, they have different perceptions about different things. And from a long time ago, even, and Holly talked about this in our group speak, that I learned that mothers of children of color warn their young boys, especially, to be very cautious when they're out in public and polite and not challenge police officers and be wary of police officers. And, that just is not my experience at all. And so it was like, that is one example of being very different and to be aware of it. So this book just covers a lot of ground for me. If I have a synopsis, that's what I would say. But a lot of the discussions and videos touched on those aspects.
Thank you. Yeah, Jake.
I almost muted the wrong one. Yeah, so the most impactful thing that stuck with me was actually, I talked about white privilege a minute ago. There was a teacher who conducted this, not experiment, but I guess he just showed his class the symbolism of how you're starting forward in life. He had everyone in the class wad up a paper ball, and he said to be successful in life, all you have to do is make this shot, throw this paper ball into a garbage can. And those in the front of the classroom had no problem making it into the garbage can. They had no complaints at all about fairness or inequity or inequality, whereas the children in the back of the classroom recognized that they had a much lesser opportunity to make it into that garbage can of success. And he pointed out that a lot of you start a lot further forward than others in life. And I don't know, I thought that was interesting. That was impactful to me. So if I would have learned something like that as a young child, as opposed to right now, 34, almost 35 years old, I don't know. It just seems like it's a different perspective on life that he's offering these kids.
And I think too, something that I've had come up in conversation as we talk about this challenge and other things is that you don't have to feel bad necessarily for having that privilege, but being aware of it, right? Like in acknowledging where you're at as compared to others. I will feel bad if I do something to hurt someone, or I'll feel bad if my actions have caused harm, but then to also lend a hand and help the people who aren't starting in the same position. Because I think a lot of people's natural reaction is, well, don't blame me for being born white, or, don't blame me for being born here or having parents who are still married to each other, or whatever the circumstance is. So I think that's something important to point out from my perspective is what I saw.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is just recognition. Realizing that there are people who start ahead, and I am one of them for a number of various reasons. I'm not, I might not be the front of the pack, but I had advantages over others all my life.
Can I say something?
Please do.
So, I think, I don't know. I think we all have our own privileges, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. I think you have to stop with the white guilt and everything. So, I was born with a lot of privileges, went through Catholic school and throughout my life and everything. So I had great advantages, even if, we were not rich or whatever. And so when I came to the States, the transition was easy. I spoke the language, and, it was good. But one thing I noticed is that I didn't realize this until I spoke with my girls, and they went to Howell High School. And there's a lot, little element of bullying and subtle racism, I guess, to the kids and all that stuff. I didn't experience it myself. I was happy to move into this community. Everybody was great. Never experienced any craziness or whatever. Maybe a guy in a pickup truck screaming at me in the middle of the night driving by or whatever, which is fine. I can deal with that. But I didn't want my daughters to be subjected to that. So I tell them to never have a chip on their shoulders. When kids are kind of awful to them or whatever. It was a big surprise to me because I never experienced it. And, you know, they were called chopsticks, egg roll, and all that stuff, which is nothing. It's just words and all that stuff. Sorry about, you know, I get easily emotional, just overactive tear ducts. But I think the best thing to do is to appreciate the advantages you have and try to bring others with you, along with you, regardless of the color. And realize that we all have our quirkiness or prejudices, like, you know, some people don't like broccoli, some people don't like cauliflower or whatever. So, you know, even Asians are highly prejudiced. And about things, but from an individual basis, I think the best way for people to go through this is to be exposed to different cultures. I think the more exposure your kids have to other different cultures, you know, take them on trips and travel to different countries. I think the best thing for our high school kids is to have them travel and be immersive in different cultures where they can realize how good they have it here. And I think that will give them a certain appreciation for life and others. That's my 2 cents.
Richard, thank you for your 2 cents. Thank you. I appreciate your willingness to share your story and share the story of your daughters. It is 12:55, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but I have to admit I had an ulterior motive for wanting to do this program. So here it goes. It's my call to action. We, as the Howell Rotary Club, identify ourselves as a service organization whose members are leaders in the community. We say that we work to improve our community. My definition of being a leader means engaging in active self-reflection, learning, leading to growth, admitting when not knowing the answers, and understanding that the way things have always been done doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right way to continue doing them. Where I'm at in my journey is I'm white. I have been socialized to be white and believe that white is the norm. I understand that I have white privilege, and privilege being defined in this context that doesn't mean that I haven't worked to get to where I'm at today, but it does mean I haven't faced discrimination based on my skin color. I moved to Howell in 1993, and I knew nothing of its history. You think the Google machine would have been around back then. To this day, I still find myself in the position of having to defend where I work and where I live. This is work that we as a community, as a county, as a world need to engage in. I'm also on the Livingston Diversity Council. So this is where I'm probably going to cry. For those of you that don't know, I have a 16-year-old son. My husband and I adopted Robbie at birth. It was a private adoption. Robbie's birth mom chose us. My son is Black. So I am doing this work not only because I believe it needs to be done, and I agree with Richard, exposure to different people and different cultures and diversity, it just makes the world a better place. It makes our community a better place. It makes our workplaces a better place. But I'm also doing this work because we're talking about the future of my son. 1 in 3 Black men in this country will end up in prison. 1 in 3. I have one of those, and I'm hoping he's not the one. I have had to have conversations with my son about when you are driving, this is how you need to act if you are pulled over. I have heard from Black people today how they will not drive in Livingston County at night. This is where I'm raising my son. These conversations and this work not only impacts our future, this potentially impacts my son's life. And I also want to say that I'm not just talking about racism, I'm talking about all of the isms that are out there. So my question to the group is, with 2 minutes to go, like we're going to solve this, what are our next steps as a club? How do we continue engaging and learning, if that's the point where we're at, engaging in how to understand how to have conversations around this? How do we engage in doing the work to move our community forward? I've done a little digging. I do know that the Ann Arbor Rotary Club has created what they call ARC, an anti-racism committee. I believe that District 6380 has 3 initiatives for 2021, and one of them is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So my question is, what does the club feel would help us to continue going forward and to do the work that needs to be done? So, yeah, and this wasn't meant to be a pop quiz, so if you don't have an answer right now, I totally get it, but I really would ask that everyone think about this and think about what really would impact. You know, I have simple ideas like, you know, would you like a link in the weekly newsletter? Not the little, oh, it'll only take 15 minutes. But, you know, I'm sure if I ask the Livingston County United Way, they will not have a problem with me sharing some of those resources again. Would conversations like this, maybe not during, you know, a Monday meeting, but just little get-togethers to talk about things, would bringing in different speakers help? And I've noticed that some people have been replying in chat, but I cannot do 2 things at once. So now I'm going to go back and read those. So if somebody else wants to say something, please feel free.
I will say something while you're reading, and it's not necessarily an answer to the call to action, but it's somewhat in response, and hopefully a funny story, because I know everything's super deep, but a funny story that causes pause. So I had 4 children 2 years apart, and 9 years later I was pregnant with our 5th. And when my 9-year-old, when my 9-year-old was coming with us to the hospital for us to have the baby, all 4 kids were going to grandma's and we're going to the hospital to have the baby. He says to me, I hope that our baby is adopted. We didn't quite understand, but Holly's story reminded me. So we said, what do you mean? And he's like, well, adopted means the baby's born Black. Because we had several friends who had Black children that were adopted. And at 9 years old, in his world, he didn't come in contact with Black adults ever, African-American adults ever. And the children all had white parents. So he wanted our baby to be born Black like some of his peers and friends at 9 years old. But it did give me some pause. And of course, we explained the situation about what adoption really means. But when you live in a homogenous society like we do live in, this child was 9 years old. And he didn't know that African American was a culture, that people were born and raised and separate from us. He was so homogenized that he just thought being born Black meant being adopted. So that to me, and that son is 18 and he hates when we tell that story because he feels like an idiot now. But he, you know, to me, it was just something to give a little bit more pause. And so during February's Black History Awareness Month, we took the kids to see Remember the Titans. And I now have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old. And we're watching this show at MJR, and I keep leaning over and I'm like, do you know what's going on? And we had a big discussion. We talked about it, and we talked about how, you know, people weren't allowed to be on the same football teams if they had different color skin. Isn't that weird? And just trying to raise that awareness in our kids. Because sometimes, you know, Richard, I'm so sorry what happened to your girls. And sometimes I think parents just don't interact with their kids enough about culture for them to know that that's disrespectful and rude to treat other people that way. And ignorance is not a reason for bullying. So in my opinion, just keeping the dialogue open, especially for the next generation, so that they can understand. Because I have to say, I went to Howell High School years and years ago. I didn't participate in anything like that, but it was just homogenous for me too. And it took me going to MSU to grow up and figure out that there's all different cultures and colors, you know? So thank you so much, Holly. Anybody else have an answer to her call to action?
All right, beware, I'm going to send out a survey then. So I'm giving you guys all time to think, but watch out for an email from me.
I think it was a wonderful discussion. I'm very grateful to have an open dialogue about this, because I think sometimes we do just fall into the comfortable normalcy of what we're living. And like Christy said earlier, it's really hard for a bunch of white people to figure out how to accept diversity. You need to have that come in so that you can hear about what other people's experiences are. So thank you, every single one of you who was on the panel. I really appreciate it. I feel like we had a good dialogue. And of course, Holly, please, you can be the diversity representative because you are on the Diversity Council as well. Send out those emails, share whatever information, and I think we'd all be happy to hear it. So